All right, well, I think we're going to go ahead and get started here. So first off, I want to say thanks for joining us today for our webinar on beating ransomware, and we're going to be talking about real stories and best practices. My name is Andy Surwich. I'm a technical evangelist with Altero Software, and with me today is a good friend of mine, Luke Oriana, a virtual systems administrator from the Trivalent Group. Hey, Luke, how's it going?
Hey everyone.
Hey, thanks for taking the time to join us today. We're looking forward to talking about this topic here that tends to be a very troublesome and annoying topic for a lot of people. So again, appreciate you taking the time to be here today to talk to us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by covering our agenda today. Advanced slide. Thank you, sir. So just going to start by covering our agenda today. We're going to do some introductions of myself, Luke, Altero Software, and then we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of what everyone is here to listen to today. We're going to talk about ransomware. We're going to go over an introduction to ransomware, what it is, how to identify it. We're going to look at the attacker's perspective, so you get an idea of how easy it is for attackers to actually conduct these types of attacks. And then we're going to get into real-life stories. And this really is my personal favorite part of this particular webinar because it really puts it in context how easy it is and how pervasive ransomware is in the industry by looking at some real-life stories, some real-life situations. Luke works for a service provider, and I would say there's probably no one I know more than Luke that likes to really dig into viruses and ransomware and figure out how they work and what their vector of attack is. So Luke's got some great stories lined up for us, that things he's run into in the wild here. So there'll be some good stuff to hear there. After that, we're going to talk about the response you should take, some actions you can take, and some prevention as well. And with that in mind, this webinar, we only have about 20, 30, 35 minutes to talk to everyone about this topic. But with that said, at Altero here, we've got a new ebook that we are going to be releasing next week, specifically about ransomware. And we wanted to, give attendees of this webinar a little bit of an early access to that webinar, as kind of a thank you for coming out and viewing the webinar, and as well, kind of just to give you that supplemental information of an ebook about ransomware while it's still fresh in your mind from this webinar. So we're going to have the link to that ebook here later in the slide deck. And then finally, we're going to be doing a Q&A at the end of the session here. And with that in mind, you can feel free to ask the questions throughout the webinar as you think of them, but we won't be covering the questions until the Q&A section. So you can either save that question for the end, or you can ask it while you're thinking about it, and we will we'll look at getting to it later. So that covers our agenda, and we'll move into some introductions now. So again, my name is Andy Surwich. I'm a technical evangelist with Altero Software. I'm also a Microsoft Cloud and Data Center MVP in the Hyper-V competency. So I've been around the industry for a long, long time. I'm not as involved in day-to-day support operations for businesses like I used to be prior to working for Altero, but I have run into the occasional ransomware, now and again. And definitely agree that it's a very, very big issue in the industry right now, and definitely a headache, as most people will know. So excited today to do some discussion with Luke about this issue, and hopefully give you guys some good information as well. So if we've got any blog readers out there, we've got some great Hyper-V and VMware resources out at altero.com/hyper-v and /VMware. And if there's anyone out there that really likes Twitter, I'm quite active on Twitter. My handle is at @asurwich. And feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm, like I said, very active on Twitter, and very happy to have a discussion, about any technology topic. So feel free to reach out. And with that, I will pass it over to Luke for him to introduce himself. Go ahead, Luke.
Hey everyone. My name is Luke Oriana. I've been immersed in the realm of IT since about 2005. I work for a managed service provider, and I've been involved in many cases with ransomware cleanup or response. We've done a little bit of consulting on ransomware attacks for other companies. And today, I hope that I can share some of my stories and experience with you guys, so then you can be prepared if you ever come within an encounter of a ransomware attack. So that's basically me in a nutshell.
Thank you much, Luke. So real quick, just want to do a quick introductory slide about Altero Software, the sponsor and the company I work for. Altero is a fast-growing developer of fantastic backup software. One of our big focuses is that backup software needs to be easy to use, but still provides a high level of functionality and value to our customers. So with that said, we've got about 30,000 SMBs that are using our virtual backup product, our flagship product, Altero VM Backup. If you are interested in checking out that product and then getting a little bit more information about it, you can go to our website, altero.com/VM-backup for more information. And with that, I've got one other slide here if you want to advance it real quick, Luke. I wanted to kind of frame this discussion about ransomware from the response perspective. So, we're going to be showing you a number of different prevention strategies and cleanup strategies here in the next 20 to 30 minutes. But I want to mention one thing about backup. You can put all kinds of prevention in place, and the fact of the matter is that something always seems to slip through, despite best laid plans. And when it comes to ransomware, a lot of the times, backup is your very last defense mechanism for dealing with this problem. So I just want to keep that fresh in everyone's minds that you want to make sure you have a good, solid backup plan in place, just in case the worst happens. Data loss aside, when we're talking about ransomware, just keep backup in mind as your last line of defense. So with that in mind, I will hand it over to Luke, and he will take us through and talk about ransomware and what he's run into. So go ahead and take it away, Luke.
All right. So what is ransomware? Ransomware is malicious code that tricks the user into downloading it and installing it, and then holds either the computer or the application or its data for ransom. And that usually asks for money in return. Usually it comes out in the form of an email. I've included a picture right here. This is actually an email that was sent to my company, and it looks like the form of a fax. Here's your fax. And then it includes a link. And as soon as you click that link, it installs the malware on the computer, starts encrypting data, and then you get a pop-up saying your data's been encrypted. Also, notice at the bottom here, this is part of our spam filter. I want to include this to show that it includes where the email is coming from, and you can see that it's been changed from the recipient to where it's actually externally coming from. So when you get an email, you can okay. So whenever you get an email coming through, it's not always the domain that it's coming from. There are tons of different flavors out there of ransomware. There's CryptoWall, there's Bleep, LOL, there's CryptoLocker. It's probably the most famous one. So just got to be aware of the different flavors out there. Usually the form of payment that they ask for is Bitcoin. Some have been reported to ask users to repeat a survey. But usually it's going to be Bitcoin.
You know, it's really interesting. If you let me jump in here real quick, Luke. I mean, if you go back to that email, I mean, if I'm a standard end user and I'm just going about my day, maybe I'm in accounting, right? Maybe I'm not, I'm not necessarily an IT guy, and I'm in accounting, and with the attacker spoofing the send from line like that, I mean that really looks legitimate. I mean, your average user is not going to know to go down to your anti-spam filter settings or actually look at the actual send from address. So I think, and you're probably going to talk about this a little bit later, one of the biggest preventative items that I've always seen is to be user training, which can be really difficult for those larger companies, right?
Yep, it's very important, is your user training. Yep. So what does it look like when you're infected? Basically, ransomware will change your files so that you can no longer access them. Depending on the flavor, like in this picture, the Roku flavor was changing all the extensions to .roku. And usually they will include a document that shows you how to unlock those files, how to pay the Bitcoin ransom, usually an HTML and a text file. And then usually you'll get a pop-up. Ransomware wants you to know that you've been infected, and they want you to easily be able to pay them their money. So in this picture, this is a crypto locker, and it will ask for money, and then it will provide a time on the amount of time where it will keep your files, and then it will actually delete your files if you don't pay the ransom. So it kind of puts that pressure on your company.
I think the other thing that I've run into with those with those timers is I've heard of people paying the ransom, and big surprise, they've not gotten the decryption key back. Because I mean, obviously the people doing this are not they're not trustworthy individuals, right? So that's that's just something to keep in mind when thinking about paying the ransom.
Yep, definitely. So how can this affect my organization? You may or may not have come into an encounter with a ransomware attack. Symantec reported that since 2015 to the quarter of this year, the amount of attacks per day has quadrupled. So it's starting to really ramp up in the amount of incidents that we're seeing. I know at my work, there was a time this year where it was almost every week where a client would get infected. So it's starting to get worse. So that's another thing why it's good to know about ransomware and how to defend against it. There's thousands of documented cases where a company did pay. So it is very profitable to write ransomware and to distribute it. So the attacker groups, they're making bank off of this. And like Andy said, if you do pay the ransom, there's no guarantee that it's actually going to give you your money back. I've heard horror stories where the company paid the ransom, tried to do the encryption, the decryption, and it failed, and they had no data, and they just paid $5,000. So another point that I really want to stress is that make sure that your restore times for your data is actually efficient for your company. I've heard through the grapevine of a horror story where a hospital had to actually pay the ransom because the amount of time that it was going to take for them to restore from backup was too much time for them to be down. So in that case, the attackers went out there. From the attacker's perspective, it's a lot of people think when they think of a hacker, they think of oh, the dude in an apartment surrounded by lots of monitors and they're super smart. Well, in this day and age, you don't have to be the smartest person to distribute ransomware. You can buy it for as little as $39 over the darknet. In this picture, this is off of a forum where this group was selling the ransomware for $39. So, and some groups actually will provide the ransomware for free, and then they'll provide instructions on how to deploy that without getting caught, and then they will take a cut from the amount that the ransom gets paid, and then they will make their money that way. So if you think about it, it's pretty good business strategy there on their part. Once they have their malicious applications, they need a way to deploy it out to people. There's different ways to do this. One common way is to use Tor email relay servers. They're basically anonymous relay servers that use onion routing, so you can't track where they're coming from. It's all anonymous. Another way is to use a Tor browser, which is just like a regular browser, and it prevents you from being tracked by anyone. So an attacker can use a Tor browser, make an MSN account, sign up, send out their malware through the MSN account, and the FBI can't even track them. But if you really want to ramp up your production and send a lot of emails, then the way to do that is to compromise a server, and that's pretty common. What I've seen, any other compromised server that I've run into, the first thing they do is install an auto mass email sender, because it's really profitable to be able to just send emails in a large quantity like that. So one thing I recommend for terminal servers and remote desktop servers is to change the port from 3389 to something else, because there's programs out there that will sniff through the internet for those ports, and if they get a hit, then they'll start brute forcing that server over and over again. So either invest in a good firewall that can prevent against those attacks, or you can just change the port. There's also third-party applications out there that you install on your remote desktop server, terminal server, that will act as like a mini firewall and block out those kind of attempts. So one thing to think about.
I think the other thing for RDS, at the very least, would be an Active Directory account lockout policy. That way, it's at least extending the amount of time it takes for a brute force to work. Is that something that you've seen used a lot, Luke?
Yep, definitely. We've used those in certain environments. The only thing, some clients don't like their accounts getting locked out, so then you have to deal with that sort of political situation. But yeah, that's definitely a way to prevent getting brute force, is to put an account lockout policy on those Active Directory accounts, for sure.
Right. Always comes back to the conversation of ease of use versus security, right?
Yep. Let me give you a rundown of a scenario that I've experienced for a landscaping company. Basically, the user received an email, just like actually it was the exact same email that I showed you in an earlier slide that came to our company as well. This one was really popular, that it would state that, oh, you have a fax. Well, the user clicked on it, infected all the company data, everything was encrypted. They called us for help. We restored their data, had the user turn off their laptop, and then for some reason the next day they turned their laptop back on and it re-encrypted everything again. So point point in case, make sure that you take your laptop off the network. Don't turn it on. What we did is we ended up just reformatting that laptop and performed a second restore. But the point is, whatever device you find did the infection, take it off the network. You don't want to have to be down again just because someone turned it back on. Another scenario that I've run into with a healthcare auditing firm, a user received the email with a link at the end of the week when they're almost out of work on that Friday, and they opened the link, closed out of their computer, logged out, and over the weekend, over a terabyte of the company's data was encrypted. So a large amount of data was lost. And their backup solution really didn't allow for a speedy recovery. It was going to take over 2 days to restore everything. And so in this situation, what we had to do was we had to prioritize which applications or which data needed to be accessible at that time. So luckily they had a lot of data that they didn't need to do their daily tasks. So we in this situation, prioritizing your backup or restore was what's the word? Was needed.
Gotcha. So, you know, interesting about the backup talk there. So, you know, all these companies that, you know, it's become a normal thing for people to test their backup strategy, right? To test the restores on a regular basis to make sure they can recover. But I find that often there is very little thought to, like you mentioned, the time aspect there. You know, if it's going to take 2 days to completely recover, I mean, that's well and fine in a DR situation where maybe the building burned down or was struck by a meteor, you know, whatever. But, you know, in this type of situation, when it's just a simple, well, I shouldn't say simple, but a ransomware infection, that's a problem when it's going to take 2 days to recover from that. So, you know, I always, when I'm talking to people about backup, not only do you want to make sure that your backup strategy works, you want to make sure it works fast enough as well, right? So, and that makes me think back to one of your previous examples too, where you know, it was more cost effective for the company to just pay the ransom because of all the lost time associated with that. Not to mention they were a hospital and needed to be up and running. So it just comes back to the conversation about, you know, quick restore times out of backup, right? Just thought that was an interesting observation.
Yep, definitely. Another scenario that I've run into for a construction supply company. This one was really messy. Basically, the user that got infected with the ransomware had administrative access to all the servers in the company. And so with this particular flavor of ransomware, it spread throughout all the servers and encrypted everything that it could. The local C drive, not just file shares, it encrypted everything. The only thing that was actually working in the company was Exchange, because the services that you need to run Exchange are actually like in use, so they couldn't become encrypted. So yeah, this one was a really messy one, and on top of that, their backup solution didn't run bare metal restores, so we had to basically rebuild the servers from scratch and then restore the file data on top of that. So it was a lengthy process, and it was about a 5-figure bill from us for consulting fees. So make sure that you plan out who has access to what and if they really need access or not, because it can be pretty detrimental if you get ransomware and that person has domain admin access to everything. It can take your company down to its knees like it did for this one.
I think this is one of those cautionary tales of the whole idea of providing as little access as possible based on the user's needs, right? So I mean, obviously this was a problem in that the affected user had basically had keys to the kingdom, but had they at least had limited access, the damage could have been mitigated, to maybe one or two servers, or maybe even just a file share, right? So again, just coming back to the standard IT best practices of least access, right?
Yep, just enough access.
Yep,
Sure.
exactly.
So there's a few things you can do to protect your environment against ransomware. One of the more costly solutions is getting some sort of spam filtering or web filtering. I have a buddy that uses OpenDNS for his company, and it works pretty well. Basically, the web filtering solution would prevent against emails that come through with links on them. The user clicks on the link that happens to be malicious, then the web filter is able to scan that link before it's opened up, and then they get access blocked to that executable. So that's actually pretty nifty. The second thing, which Andy did reiterate, was employee awareness of ransomware. It's really important to make sure that your users are educated and they know of ransomware, what it looks like, and what not to click on. Because you can have all the nice fancy gadgets and solutions to prevent yourself from ransomware, but you can't stop a user from clicking on the link. So make sure your employees are educated. That's a really beneficial one right there. There's a number of free things that you can do that don't with the native Windows server. One is software restrictions with GPO, which I'll demo in a few minutes here. Basically, it allows you to control what types of files get run where. So you can use that software restrictions to block executables from running in the app data folder, which is where most malware runs. So we've had pretty good success with setting clients up with that. Second thing you can do is use File Server Resource Manager to basically screen for files on all your file shares. So basically you can control what types of files are saved to your file shares. So when the CryptoLocker or ransomware application starts encrypting data, then it will prevent it from modifying those files. And I'll demo that as well. For software restrictions with GPO, the minimum requirement is Server 2003, and the workstation has to be Windows XP at a minimum. So it's been around for a while. For file screening, to screen for files, all you have to do is install the File Server Resource Manager role on the server, and the way that I use it with a PowerShell script, you have to have Server 2012. You can have Server 2008 if you want to just do some of the minimal things with file screening. So you only have to have Server 2008 for that. And let me go ahead and get the demo up here.
So this is where I'll start praying to the demo gods for you to make sure that everything goes perfectly,
Yep. All right. Okay. So software restrictions. It's pretty simple to deploy. Basically, I have group policy management open on this server. I have my group policy. I just named it ransomware software restriction policy, and I have it applied to my computers. It's going to be a computer policy, so you want to make sure you're applying it to your computers. And all you have to do, there's just two settings you have to change to configure this. You go into Policies, Windows Settings, Security Settings, software restriction policies, and then you click on additional rules, and all you have to do is add in these two paths, app data and then the star.exe, so anything executable wise cannot be run within the app data folder. And then if, because I mean some ransomware they don't necessarily have to run in the app data folder, they can run into the subfolders. So I have the slash wildcard.exe after that to specify any subfolders that are in the app data folder can't run executable files as well. Also, since every ransomware is different, this isn't 100% failsafe. If you happen to have some flavor that runs it outside of the app data folder, then this won't protect you at all. But as of right now, it does a pretty good job of protecting the user from running any sort of malicious ransomware. Also, note that because you're blocking executables from running in the app data folder, depending on how your environment is set up and what kind of third-party applications you're running, this might cause issues. So depending on your environment, some clients we don't set this up for because they have too many third-party applications running on their workstations. The one that we're using right now that or one that we're using that we've implemented it for right now, they use a lot of terminal servers and they just use email on their workstation, so it works fine for them. But if you can't implement this in your environment, you can use File Server Resource Manager to just screen for files. And let me go ahead and show that.
So while you're getting that up, Luke, so for the GPO application filtering like that, basically that's screening all the executables that run from that location. So that way, essentially only approved applications that you, the administrator, have gone in and added are allowed to execute from that location, correct?
Yep.
Okay. So at the very least, you're providing some security, but it's going to add a little bit of management overhead to your environment as well.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. So for File Server Resource Manager, you can do a lot of stuff with File Server Resource Manager. You can do quotas, you can do storage reports. It's actually a pretty neat role. I suggest if you have a file server in your environment that you install this role because it allows you to do so many different things. But for file screening, basically you can control what types of files are saved to a share. To set that up, basically you first create your file group. I have a CryptoLocker files group, and in that I included all the different extensions of the current ransomware that's out there right now. So let's see, the bleep ransomware changes all the extensions to .bleep, so I've got that in there. And you really have to stay on top of the latest ones that are out there if you're going to implement this, because ransomware always keeps evolving, so it's kind of like a never-ending cycle. So once you have your file group defined, then you go ahead and create the template. The template allows you to configure what happens to those files that are in that file group. So I have my file screen template created. It's called CryptoCheck. And basically it does passive screening right now. You can do active screening, and that will prevent any of those type of files being created on that file share. Depends on which way you want to go, if you want to be more passive about it or prevent users from creating any sort of CryptoLocker files. I usually do active screening. And then you can create custom events in Event Viewer when a file gets created. And I'll go back to that in a sec. And the way I have it set up, I have it a PowerShell script that executes if a CryptoLocker file or not necessarily crypto, any ransomware file gets detected, then a PowerShell script will run, and what I have it set to, it will query the event log that gets created and parse some of the information here, and it will block that user from any shares on the file server, and then we'll send a message to our help desk with the user, the domain, and instructions, basically, on how to clean up the server. So let me go ahead and show you how that works here. Oh, one more thing. I also have the template applied to the F drive, so any folders in my F drive are going to be screened. So here's my company files, all my different departments. So anything in here that gets tagged for anything in the crypto group will get that will basically get denied. So let me go ahead and go over to a workstation here. All right, so I have my map drive here. I'm going to go ahead and pretend to encrypt this file. So let's say we got the .bleep ransomware that changes everything to .bleep. It denies it, preventing the file from being changed, and then also access denied to the shared. So the user instantly gets cut access off to the file share, and they can no longer do any harm. They can't modify any other files on the file server, and so the company data is protected.
Okay, so that's pretty handy there, Luke. So to summarize, basically what you've done is you've set up a rule in File Server Resource Manager that basically watches a share for specific file extensions, and if it notices one of those file extensions, it tags the source user as, I don't know, infected or as a problem user, and cuts them off from that share so no further damage can be done, essentially, correct?
Yep, correct. And it does one more thing. It also sends an email message to, well, for my company we have it sent to the help desk, but you can modify it to whoever. But you get a alert message due to the PowerShell script that contains the server that's infected or that's being encrypted and the domain, so we know which company it's coming from, and it also includes the user that is running the ransomware. And I've also included the command that you can run to give the user access back to the file shares. So once you've cleaned up their workstation, reformatted it and everything, the engineer that's working on this case can come back to the file server, just type in the command that they can just copy right from the email alert, hit enter. You're going to get a little bit of red because some of the built-in Active Directory file shares you can't really modify, but basically you give the user access back, and you can see here I can get right back into my map drives. So really handy configuration, and the best part is it's free. And also another thing, I can have this set up in 3 minutes due to a PowerShell script. I plan on sharing it with everybody, so in the next week or so, just be on the lookout. I'm going to have a blog post out there going over the script and showing how to use it, and so everyone else can have that set up in their environment too in a matter of 3 minutes with the script. So just something to be on the lookout for.
And so again, you mentioned that was free. That's just from one of the roles that's included in Windows Server, correct?
Yep, correct.
Perfect.
All right. So what to do if you do get infected with ransomware? Some people, they see that all their data is getting encrypted and they panic. Um, it's good to have a procedure written out for your environment just to follow. We have a documented, standardized procedure that we use for clients so people can follow it. So for our procedure, you first have to find the source of the infection. Sometimes this can be difficult. If you have a file server resource manager configured and you're doing file screening, it tells you who did the infection. Another way you can tell is by right-clicking on the encrypted file and going to the the details. It'll show the owner, and usually the owner gets changed to the person who's modifying the file. So yeah, and then there's another way you can find out who modified or who's infected with ransomware by just doing a search on the file server for like home drives. They're usually the culprit is the one whose user drive is encrypted. But once you find the source of the infection, our policy is to immediately turn off that workstation. We take it off the network and we reformat it. There's certain antivirus that will say they can clean it up and everything, but it's not worth it. It's better to just take the time to rebuild the machine than to have your company re-affect again and take everybody down. So that's our policy, is immediately as an automatic reformat. And then after that workstation's off the network and you're free from getting reinfected again, then restore from backup. And if you have backups of VMs, restore the VM backup if it's applicable to your environment. So that's basically the process that we follow.
All right. Well, thanks for that information, Luke. That's a bunch of great stuff, and a lot of good information, a lot of good preventative stuff in there as well. So with that in mind, shortly here I will be putting the link in the slide deck here for the ebook ransomware, the ebook on ransomware that we're publishing out there. And we're going to get to the Q&A in a second as well. What I wanted to cover real quick is just a quick 3-4 minutes about Altero VM backup. I think it was pretty apparent in each of the scenarios laid out that really, like I said earlier, the last line defense is backup, right? Because you can put all this prevention in place, and again, it just seems like something always has the possibility to sneak through, and especially as new variants of ransomware come out, the game is constantly changing. So again, I just wanted to quick talk about our product, Altero VM Backup. We have a couple of key areas that we like to focus on around our product. It's got to be easy to use and deploy. It's got to be highly capable, and it needs to provide unbeatable value. When people see easy to use in the description, they just assume that it's missing some key features, and that's not the case. We work really hard to provide both sides of that statement, easy to use and highly capable. And then outstanding support. We pride ourselves on great support. When you call Altero support, you're not going to be getting the standard escalation type of support. You're not going to be asked, have you tried turning it off and turning it back on again, right? You're going to get an L3 caliber engineer that's going to own your issue from A to B. So we really pride ourselves on outstanding support. So with that said, we actually had a mention on our Twitter feed from a user that actually just went through the Zepto variant of ransomware, and Thankfully, he had a backup solution in place. He had our solution in place, and ultimately saved him from a huge headache there. So that was he had to use that last resort of using backup. So can you advance the slide real quick, Luke? All right, so what I wanted to do, you saw this screen a little bit earlier, but what I wanted to do is I wanted to do a quick, just a quick demo of our management console so that you could see what it looks like, if you need to recover a VM in a, in a ransomware situation. So let me share my screen here real quick. Okay. You able to see my screen, Luke?
Yep, I see it.
Okay. So this is the dashboard of our Altero VM backup software. And this is the dashboard. It kind of shows you all the ins and outs of your backup environment. We got some statistics like backup size per day, what the backup drive status is, and the information on current running jobs or upcoming backups. Your typical dashboard. So what I wanted to do is, when we've been talking about ransomware, what does it look like if I had to recover from a ransomware incident using our product? So after you've added in your various hosts from your environment into our backup console, and you've gone through and you have defined backup locations, what you can do then is that's all you need to go on and do to take a manual backup. So for the purposes of this demo, we're going to assume that that's already been taken care of, right? So now let's pretend that for some reason one of my servers has been hit by ransomware. So I'm going to come into Restore. I'm going to select the repository that I want to pull the virtual machine backup from. It could be in my local repository. It could be my off-site repository. And I can click Next. And then it's just a matter of choosing, which virtual machine do I want to recover. So I'm going to click on MCW01. I'm going to say Next. And from here I have the option of selecting which version. I'll go back to the 18th, and I'll just restore it as a clone. Maybe I want to keep the maybe I want to keep the original version around in a sandbox so I can figure out how it was infected. I can, do a little bit of research on what happened to the original VM. Then I can select which host I want to restore it to, and I select the data store. And by default, our software will make sure that the virtual NIC on that restored virtual machine will be disabled to avoid IP conflicts in case the original machine is still up and running. So at that point, I would simply click Restore, and it will actually launch the restore job, which I can monitor up here, or I can go back to the dashboard and I can see that in action as well. So again, that was just a really quick demo I wanted to go over, with the idea that, using Altero's product, what would it look like if I needed to recover an affected machine. And again, we pride ourselves on really easy to use software, so as you saw, the process there was fairly easy to run through. So with that in mind, I've got just another slide or two here. So again, I just want to talk about our partner program here real quick. If you're an IT reseller, we do have a great partner program. It's free to sign up. We offer free partner training and certification. There's absolutely no commitment, and we've got attractive discounts. Also in mind, we've got the program available for MSPs. So if you're an MSP, feel free to reach out if you have questions. Altero.com/partners, or you can send an email to sales@altero.com if you want someone to get back with you and talk to you more about the program. So as I mentioned earlier, we are releasing a brand new ebook on ransomware. And officially that book is launching next week sometime, but we felt that because we're giving a webinar here on ransomware, we wanted to kind of give attendees early access to that ebook. So And again, there's only so much that Luke and I can cover in a 30 to 40-minute time span. So that's why we wanted to put this book out there too. It kind of, maybe fills any gaps that are left, and maybe it gives a little bit more fine-grained detail about the different variants and different things that you'll run into with when dealing with ransomware. So if you're interested in checking out that ebook, the URL is right there, bit.ly/ebook-ransomware. So again, if you're interested, feel free to check that out, and we hope you enjoy that. So at this point, we're going to spend a couple, 5, 6, 7 minutes on Q&A. And at this point, I am going to go through here and look at the questions we've gotten. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention real quick too regarding the ebook. That link is also in the chat for you to get the link as well, if that's easier than grabbing it from the slide deck. So again, if you're interested in that ebook, check out the chat. So let's see. We got a question here. What is the best way to protect networked map drives? Is backup the only solution? Well, maybe Luke can speak to this a little bit more, but that second preventative option you showed us, Luke, the File Server Resource Manager, that's probably the preferred way of protecting network drives. Is that correct?
Yep. That's a good tool in your belt to defend against that. There's also ransomware out there that doesn't change the extension, and in that case, you probably would be better off using software restrictions to help with that. There's pros and cons of each tool that you use, so that's one thing to keep in mind.
Well, maybe a more holistic solution is kind of a combination of the two, correct?
Yeah, definitely.
Right. So, and unfortunately, because the variants keep changing, and it's this constant cat and mouse game with us, the administrators, and then the attackers, that a solution that works today might be completely different a year from now, right?
Yep.
All right. Well, let's see. What else do we have here? I am scrolling through the list. I've got not so much a question, but just an interesting observation from a user here saying, if attackers are making money, obviously the software is going to keep getting more sophisticated, right? And I mean, it's very apparent that they are making money hand over fist.
Yep.
I don't remember the exact metrics, but I remember reading an article several months back that actually had projected dollar amounts in there for CryptoWall and CryptoLocker, and I mean, it was a ridiculous sum of money that those particular variants had made holistically across the whole world, right?
Yep, very lucrative.
Yeah. Let's see here. So here's a question here. Why are ransomware programs, why is it so easy for them to get around antivirus? Maybe you have a couple of thoughts on that, Luke.
Yeah, the way that they're developed, they run the attacker groups. Usually, it's a group that develops this ransomware. It's not just like one person. They test with the different antivirus that's out there, and they can just make little tweaks in their code to get around it. And it is like a cat and mouse game. So as soon as they make a tweak and the AV comes out with a definition update to counter it, then they make another tweak. So yeah.
Keeps the AV companies in business, I suppose. But
yep.
Unfortunately, unfortunately, we the administrators suffer as a result of that. We have another question here. Can we elaborate a little bit more on content filtering and software restrictions in GPO? Some examples. So, I know that when I've been in environments with that particular software restriction policies in use, a couple of issues that I remember running into were a user that had installed QuickBooks, I think, and all of a sudden, the executable wouldn't run because this policy was in place. Another user had installed every administrator's favorite little add-on, WeatherBug, right? They wanted the weather, I suppose, but the GPO in place prevented that executable from running. I think it comes back to the whole idea that it just adds additional management overhead. But I would say, from an administrator's perspective, I'm more on the side of security than ease of use. So, I mean, not only does that help me prevent ransomware infections, that also kind of prevents, it kind of prevents unauthorized applications getting installed inside of your environment, right? I don't know if there's any other examples that you can think of, Luke, regarding that.
No, that's about it. And yeah, for web filtering, there's so many different solutions out there that can be tailored to your environment. If you have remote users, there's web filtering solutions like OpenDNS that you can use that don't require you to be behind the firewall internally. So you kind of have to do your homework and figure out which solutions tailored to your environment.
Good. One thing that I keep seeing asked in the questions are, are we going to provide the script? And one thing we're also getting asked for are the CryptoLocker extensions. I think I think you'd be able to include both of those in the follow-up blog post, correct?
Yeah, and actually embedded into the script, I have the CryptoLocker file extensions. So as soon as you run the script, they're already going to be in that file group. You don't have to do anything else, but you have to keep it updated. Kind of have to do your research to find the latest ransomware that's out there and to find the different extensions that are appearing. So you have to do a little bit of maintenance, but the big bulk is already there in the script.
Perfect. So that kind of leads into the next question then. Are you aware of a good, reliable source to check on a regular basis for updated extensions?
Symantec's website has I believe they published a list of ones that they've seen. I can include that in the blog post for sure.
Good. Appreciate that. I think we've got time for maybe one or two more questions here. Let me look here. Let's see. Okay, here's an interesting question. So, do you see ransomware that stays in quote-unquote stealth mode for 30, 60 days so that all the backups you have are infected? I know personally I've never seen a ransomware that stuck around that long because, yeah, I can't think of any off the top of my head. I don't know if you've run into anything like that, Luke.
I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it yet.
I would think some of the preventative measures that we've talked about in this webinar would prevent that from happening because, if it's encrypting files for 30, 60 days, those preventative measures are probably going to catch that.
Yep.
Okay. Well, let's see. Maybe time for one more question here. Let's see. What's the easiest way to keep the file names in FSRM up to date? To my knowledge, that would be a manual process, correct, Luke?
Yeah. Yep. You'd have to go in there and just edit the file group and add in the extension.
So if they have drives mapped, it's going to encrypt those network drives. It'll encrypt their local C drive. I don't know if you've seen different behavior than that, Luke, but that's at least what I've seen on my end.
I've seen OneDrive and Google Drive get encrypted as well.
So I imagine in that situation, it's encrypting the local copies of those files, and then we'll use OneDrive, for example. OneDrive is going to upload those changes into the online repository then, correct?
Yep, correct.
And see, a lot of times I feel like, end users, they think because that storage is in the cloud, it's protected, not remembering about that local app that runs that keeps everything in sync. Oh, let's see here. We've got another good one here. We were talking about FSRM. How do you propose, as an MSP, updating the file screens across multiple environments to keep up to date as best as you can? So basically, to kind of summarize the question, it looks like you're an organization, you've got multiple locations, multiple domains. What's the best way to keep those file screens updated at each location? Now, I know if it was just one location, it'd probably be a manual process on somebody's checklist, but I would think if it's across multiple locations, you could likely script that process. What do you think, Luke?
Yep, there are PowerShell commandlets for FRSM, and you can update the file group and add stuff to it, take stuff away. So we most likely just script that out.
Okay. Another common question that I'm seeing quite a few times here in the question applet here is, will this script be made available? Will we get screenshots of how to set up the GPO stuff? I think you're going to be providing all of that information in a blog post here in the coming week or two, correct?
Yep, correct.
Okay, so you guys will want to keep an eye out on the Altero blog at, again, www.altero.com/hyper-v. You want to keep an eye out on that space and keep an eye out there, and we'll get that posted up in the coming weeks here. Let's see what else we've got here. I had a good question about antivirus and ransomware. Mainly, why is it so difficult for antivirus vendors to catch ransomware? I don't know if you can speak to that a little bit or not, Luke.
Yeah, basically it's just a game of cat and mouse. The malware creators, just all they have to do is just tweak their code a little bit, test it up against some AV, see if it bypasses it, and I mean that's why you're getting your AV definition updates almost daily, because they're trying to counterattack all of these different malicious code writers that are continually just changing up their code, doing little tweaks to get past all these different intrusion protection systems like spam filters, different AV software. So yeah, it's a never-ending cycle.
Yep, it certainly is. Seems like it's been that way forever too. just yeah, at least from what I've seen anyway. Another question we have here is, I think we had this one in our earlier session as well, is there a chance for ransomware to lie dormant, including inside of backups, and activate at a later time? Now, I know most infections that I've seen and dealt with over the years, it's been more of a, okay, the user's infected, and boom, away it goes immediately as soon as it can. I don't know if you've seen different behavior than that.
I've heard of it, but I've never encountered it. You would think that if it was lying in dormant, as soon as it starts encrypting files, you're going to detect it, you're going to know, and then you're going to clean up whatever device was infected.
Right, and I think based on the attendee's question, it might be, I wonder if they're thinking if the executable gets sucked up into a backup and later executes itself. I would think in that situation, when it happens, hopefully your preventative measures will catch it, like you said, but also at that time, I would think you'd be able to identify what executable it was, and then you'd be able to rectify that within your backups as needed. So I think that's how you would handle that situation. Let's see what else we've got here for questions. Let's see. A lot of good feedback, a lot of good questions here, everyone. Appreciate that. Let's see. I had a question here. How are you executing the PowerShell commands in FSRM to block share access via PowerShell? There was just a script tab, if I remember correctly, in FSRM. You can actually put the command in there, correct?
Yeah, the template allows you to control what events happen when those file groups are detected, and there's a section in there to run a PowerShell script that I have.
Good deal, good deal. How do you keep your list of extensions current? You know, we mentioned that was a, you know, likely a manual process, or you could script it. But I think that kind of leads well into the next question of what's a good resource to use to learn what the new extensions are?
Yeah, definitely. I know Semantic posts some of those extensions. I've gotten them from there, but when my blog post comes out, I'll go ahead and include some websites where people can look up that information to keep on track of that stuff.
Okay, good deal. Yeah, that's a good place to keep an eye on stuff, just for general security news too. I think that's actually in my RSS feed. Let's see. So here's another good question. We probably got time for one or two more. So why don't email filtering products block the ransomware attachments from executing? They would expect this to be a standard feature. I don't know if you can speak to that a little bit, Luke.
Yeah, it's kind of just like what I explained earlier. The attackers are tailoring their emails in a way to bypass those spam filters. So you know, as these vendors are updating their software to detect more malicious emails, the attackers are updating their emails that they're deploying to bypass that. They include certain keywords and stuff. It is definitely a game of cat and mouse.
Yep. And I got one more question here we'll cover. It's more of a kind of a backup related question. So, you know, if ransomware can encrypt a backup destination, so, you know, in the case of disk-based backup, you know, how would you restore your VMs? So if obviously if your backups are encrypted, they're not going to be usable. So you need to take great lengths to prevent that from happening. And what I would recommend is you very strictly follow the rule of least access. You know, you're going to want to run your backup software as a dedicated user that is the only user that has access to that storage location. That way, there's a very, very little chance that it would be tampered with a piece of ransomware. So you just want to take every crazy precaution that you can to ensure that that doesn't happen. You want to maintain as much separation from your production network as possible.
No map drives?
Go ahead. What's that?
So no map drives to your backup data?
Exactly. That should be off limits for network access. Absolutely. So with that, we're about wrapped up on time. And again, I want to thank everyone for attending. I want to say thank you as well, Luke, for sharing your insight and you know, some of your techniques for dealing with, you know, what I'm sure everyone would agree is a major problem in the IT industry today. And again, if you're interested in that free ebook that we've got out there on ransomware, the download link is right there, bit.ly/ebook-ransomware. And again, it's also in the webinar chat as well if you're lazy like me and don't want to type the entire URL out. And again, we will be posting the recording of this webinar along with the slide deck and you know, any questions that we didn't get to. We will also be posting the answers to them in a follow-up blog post, again on the Altero blog at www.altero.com/hyper-v. So keep an eye out there for the follow-up post containing all that great information, and also a post coming from Luke out on our Altero blog containing that script he was talking about, and all the other various pieces of information that will allow you to do what he showed you to do today to hopefully prevent some ransomware infections inside of your own environment. So again, Thank you, Luke, and thanks everyone for attending, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you much.